Buongiorno a tutti, sono Mauro Pizzato di Slow Food e vi do il benvenuto a questo forum dedicato al tema del rapporto tra gli uomini e gli alberi, i boschi, un rapporto che abbiamo definito spesso paradossale. Questo è il mese dedicato alle terre alte, il mese che Terra Madre dedica ai temi della montagna e del rapporto con dell'uomo con la montagna. Due informazioni tecniche prima di passare la parola al moderatore. Il pubblico può porre le domande nella chat e le domande verranno poste ai relatori nella seconda parte del forum. Sarà con noi Marcello di Osatonic che renderà graficamente i contenuti che emergeranno dal dibattito. Ogni tanto vedrete apparire questi disegni nello schermo. Lascio subito la parola ad Antonio Brunori, il moderatore, che è segretario di PFC, una organizzazione che si occupa di certificazione partecipata forestale e che collabora con Slow Food e ci sta aiutando in questa edizione di Terra Madre. A te la parola, Antonio.
Grazie. Questo è un momento molto importante per PEFC e per Slow Food, perché parliamo di gestione delle foreste e rapporto con l'uomo. Io infatti sono un dottore forestale e rappresento in Italia la certificazione delle foreste, appunto gestione sostenibile della risorsa forestale e la tracciabilità. E modererò questo incontro perché la nostra organizzazione è proprio una organizzazione a metà tra le foreste e il mercato e quindi il consumatore. Io modererò un incontro in questa maniera. Avremo una presentazione di Ranil che farà una introduzione sul tema del paradosso uomo e foresta su scala globale. Poi darò la parola a Sharon che dall'Uganda ci racconta la relazione uomo e foresta per l'ottica delle foreste equatoriali tropicali. Poi la parola sarà Jonsson, che dall'Islanda ci racconta le esperienze di vita che la comunità locale ha in rapporto agli alberi e alle foreste, e poi Renzo parlerà delle foreste e del rapporto con l'uomo nelle aree mediterranee. Qua una piccola introduzione. Le foreste rappresentano il 30% della superficie della Terra, ma è una superficie che solo 10.000 anni fa rappresentava la metà della superficie forestale, della superficie di tutta la Terra. Negli ultimi anni c'è stata una perdita della superficie forestale da 7 milioni di ettari l'anno, 20 anni fa, a 3,3 milioni di ettari questo anno, secondo i dati FAO. Quindi la riduzione sta riducendo, ma il problema di base è che la deforestazione è conseguenza dello stile di vita consumistico della nostra società. Sicuramente diete sbilanciate, l'aumento della popolazione che richiede sempre più terre agricole e terre per gli allevamenti. Ma questo problema della deforestazione crea un altro problema, perché è la seconda causa mondiale del cambiamento globale del clima. Quindi parliamo di perdita di biodiversità, parliamo di aumento delle temperature, e questo crea problemi proprio all'uomo. Il paradosso è che la perdita è prevalentemente nella fascia tropicale equatoriale, mentre nel nord del mondo abbiamo un incremento della superficie forestale. Ecco il primo paradosso. La parte ricca del mondo consuma le foreste della parte centrale del mondo, quindi le foreste equatoriali diminuiscono, le foreste boreali, dove sta la principale quantità di paesi ricchi nel mondo, aumentano. Primo paradosso. Secondo paradosso, per gestire le foreste in maniera corretta ci vuole una sensibilità del consumatore, e la sensibilità vuol dire migliori consumi, maggiore efficienza, scelta dei prodotti. Ecco perché oltre alla cultura c'è anche la cultura del consumo, quindi un consumo più responsabile, più legato al territorio e alle certificazioni, cioè strumenti che danno garanzia. Quello che voglio dire come moderatore per dare la parola è che la parola chiave per ridurre il paradosso è responsabilità. Quindi gestire le foreste in maniera corretta vuol dire assumersi la responsabilità non solo per l'ambiente delle foreste, ma per la comunità umana in senso complessivo. Quindi al gestore delle foreste del nord chiediamo una responsabilità anche per proteggere le foreste del sud del mondo. Quindi questa introduzione ai paradossi, quindi diversa riduzione delle foreste nel centro del mondo e al nord del mondo aumento, ricchezza del nord del mondo che porta depauperamento delle risorse nel sud del mondo, e terzo paradosso, necessità di avere più cultura, quindi cultura del consumo nei paesi che purtroppo sono più consumistici. E quindi passo la parola adesso a Ranil, che ci racconta la sua versione di quale è il paradosso, se c'è un paradosso, perché lui ci racconterà che non esiste un confronto, uno scontro tra uomini e alberi, ma sentiamo poi cosa ci diranno gli altri relatori. Ranil, a te la parola, grazie.
Thank you, Antonio. Thank you all for giving me an opportunity to talk to you. I have a slide presentation which I could not put up, but it is available from the organizer, and you will have the images that go with my talk. First, let me begin by something that I got from Machu Picchu in Peru. It says, "O Sol, help us, we who are the manifestations of your energy, to know our mothers, the plants. They intercede with you on our behalf." What does that mean? It means that all life operates on the capture of the energy released by an electron excited by a photon of light as it falls back to the original state. The source of light on this planet is the sun. So the sun, El Sol, Surya, it is the energy of the sun that propels life on this planet. All biota, including humans, are powered by this energy. This phenomenon is termed photosynthesis. And because plants are the agents of this capture, they are critically important to our carbon-based well-being. Now, if you look at the energy of the sun, it is captured by the plants using photosynthesis. This is the motor of life. All the energy that powers the life between us, between you, everything we eat, everything solid in us was once made solid by a plant somewhere. This is what we call primary productivity. And trees are the symbols of this relationship. They are the highest order of beings in the kingdom that provides for the well-being of ours. Now, primary productivity then occurs in the photosynthetic biomass and the leaves of the plants that constitute terrestrial ecosystems. They're huge. If you consider that the area of land on Earth is 148 million square kilometers, the area of leaf on that land is 200 times that. We have 200 times the surface area of the land of this planet represented by the leaves on the trees. And what do? First, they give us shade. They ameliorate the environment below the canopy. Then, secondly, once they create this environment, they also, in their photosynthetic process, clean water, give us oxygen, hold carbon. Not only that, the roots of the trees then go down into the nutrient cycle, and then they create the living soil, because without humic substances, which comes from the lignin of trees, we will never have humic or organic soils on the planet. So trees are also responsible, not only for the shade and for the coolness they give us, they also are responsible for creating the soil that sustains us. And when trees come together in a group, when if sufficient trees come together, there emerges an organism-created environment within it. And that's what we call a forest. And today it's really important to remember that in a forest, all forests, all over the world, anywhere in the world, trees account for 1% of the biodiversity of all forests or less. But unfortunately, today in forestry, all we think of are trees, and we forget the other 99%, which is a forest. This has to change. Now, when we start looking at the trees themselves, and the thing we were interested in, the leaves that are doing the photosynthesis, we find that leaves on most trees constitute to 1 to 5% of its total mass. But yet, this 1 to 5% of this global terrestrial biomass, the leaves, provides us the following ecosystem services. It gives us the provision of oxygen, it creates carbohydrates and sugars, it creates groundwater, cycling atmospheric water in it, it gives us ambient cooling, and it contributes to the creation of cloud condensation nuclei. All this from the leaves of trees and plants. So, how do we restore it? How do we bring it back? To restore the functions of forests, a high B2B ratio, that is a high biodiversity to biomass ratio, must be maintained as a response. One of the areas that we have begun is analog forestry. You can go to www.analogforestry.org. You will find this process. We are in 20 countries, and we seek to create a silvicultural system that creates a tree-dominated ecosystem that is analogous, similar to the original mature ecosystem. Similar in what way? In architecture and ecological function. This gives us something that feels and acts like a forest, and it's not a plantation. However, creating all this is fine, but in the middle of all this, we are losing most of our trees that produce the oxygen. But that's not all. We are also burning all the oxygen that's on this planet produced by the trees at a rate of 200 times more than the global photosynthetic biomass can give us. Every year we keep burning it for our transport, for the rocket ships we are sending into space, for the ships, everything else we do for our modern industrial lifestyle. And if you look at the concentration of oxygen in our atmosphere today, it is falling. It is falling. I'm amazed that nobody is addressing this fact today, but the global concentration of oxygen in our atmosphere is falling. And if you look at what is responsible for it, it is fossil fuel combustion. That is the greatest contributor to the drop in oxygen, and none of these people do anything to put anything back, because in the end, the only thing that can put oxygen back into the atmosphere are living plants through their photosynthetic biomass component. And nobody is now focused on doing this for the oxygen they burn. But there is another terrible thing before us. There is a danger that the temperatures will now go into the upper 40s and lower 50s. The danger is this: the optimal operating temperature for the enzyme chlorophyll is 37 degrees centigrade. As you pass 37 to 38, it begins to denature. And as the temperature goes higher and higher, photosynthesis denatures till after 45, 46, 48 degrees. Exposure over a long time means the destruction of chlorophyll, death of the plant. So future agriculture will have decreasing crops as the temperatures go up and affect the chlorophyll, and in certain areas we may not even be able to live. Nobody's addressing this yet. Now, one of the possibilities in our small farms is the effect of the leaves of trees give us evapotranspirative cooling of the ambient environment. One tree gives us enough cooling of about 10 room-size air conditioner units working 10 hours a day, roughly about 1,200,000 British thermal units worth of cooling. An acre gives us 540 million British thermal BTUs, British thermal units of cooling. Now consider what's happening. The planet is warming up, and the only thing that can give us a little bit of cooling to protect our crops, even when the temperature is going up, the leaves of the trees, they are reducing. So we suggest, what if we recognize the value of the ecosystem services recognized by the leaf? And that is, what we are saying is, look, farmers grow trees, they have leaves, the leaves are doing ecosystem services, this value is not being paid for. And that should be considered and paid for. And as a consequence, we are moving into this area of what we are calling creating a new biocurrency. Now, the statement at the Sri Lanka position paper at the UN Conference for Climate Change, COP21 in Paris, 2015 was this. Sri Lanka said, we know that the production of oxygen, clean water, cycling are carried out by the photosynthesis of trees. These primary ecosystem services, PES, are depleting at an exponential rate globally because they have not been valued or economically recognized. Sri Lanka position paper to the UN Conference for Climate Change. Now, we looked at this 2015, nothing happened. So as a consequence—
Vanilla, you have 1 minute.
Okay, as a consequence, fine. As a consequence in Sri Lanka, we have set up earth restoration, where you can invest in the creation of oxygen, www.restore.earth. You can go for it too. Now, under humans and trees, a paradox that can be resolved by recognizing our relationship to the trees. Listen to the Buddha. Buddha says, a forest is an organism of great benevolence and kindness, giving freely of his life processes, asking nothing in return. It even offers shade to the axeman who would cut it. That is the relationship we would like. Now, resolving the paradox is accepting the fundamental truth of living. I ask all of you who are looking and listening right now to join me in one little exercise. Please, you say to yourself, I am alive. Please say to yourself, I am alive. You're alive. Take a deep breath. Take a deep breath and say, I breathe. Feel the breath going into your lungs. Experience the truth that the air that you breathe was made breathable by a plant somewhere at some time on this planet. The way you individually integrate this truth into how you lead your life will determine the course of this planet. Thank you. Okay.
Grazie per la tua ottima introduzione. È un utile contributo proprio per la nostra discussione. Affascinante l'idea della moneta collegata alla clorofilla e alla fotosintesi. Ottima cosa, grazie allo Sri Lanka. Do adesso la parola a Sharon, che vive in una comunità nel villaggio di Bennett in Uganda e che ci dà l'opportunità di conoscere l'esperienza della sua comunità in relazione alla riforestazione, alla gestione degli alberi e alla convivenza con gli alberi. Grazie Sharon, a te la parola.
Thank you very much. I hope everyone is getting me loud and clear. My network is not all that well, but I believe when I'm offline, I'll reconnect very fast. A brief history of Bennett, just a small one. I want you all to know who the Bennett are. Bennett, also known as the Ndorobos, is an indigenous group of people who have lived on the moorlands of Mount Elgon for the last 200 years. And we are a hunter and gathering community, so we do small farming. Prior to the British gazetting of the forest in 1936, the Bennett were free to live their traditional lifestyle, but with gazetting of the forest came a number of restrictions imposed on the Bennett. The year from 1936 to early 70s, we saw a big change for the Ugandan government and for the Mount Elgon area. And in 1951, the area was changed from a forest to the forest reserve. I have a lot to explain in the history, but allow me to go straight. Uganda gained independence in 1962, and Mount Elgon was regazetted as a central forest. And in 1971 was extreme drought, and as a consequence, wildfires broke out throughout the forest. So to compensate, they had to grow crops, and which the forest department decided to declare that the Bennetts were encroachers. They were harassed and several people lost lives. In response, the Bennett lobby group was created in 1972 to represent the interests of the Bennetts. And in 1983, the Ministry of Forests decided to allocate land to those who had been evicted from their land, but with a lot of corruption and greed by the leaders. And in 1988, the status of Mount Elgon completely changed. It has been the hard life for Bennett since then up to now. Though we tried to lobby for government resettlement, whatever, but all in vain. We had to move out of the forest by force with a lot of that happened that I do not want to remember, even up to 2008, things have not been easy. As we try, we've realized that our life has changed a lot for the Bennett. We no longer have our cultural land where we can be happy and enjoy the trees around us, the life around the trees, the life around the gathering, the life around a lot of natural resources actually. And up to today, we still live in temporal land. There is no resettlement that is complete, and we have been left poor and hustling. Now back to our discussion of relationship between the trees and the humans that I said out here that concerns my community of the Bene. We are not actually up to date with the trees because number one, we are out of our ancestral land, and number two, we have little land to live, to do the cultivation as we have adopted, and also do animal rearing. What we have done as the Bennett Lobby Group and the Mount Elgon Indigenous or GIEC group, those are the CBOs formed by the community itself to lobby for the community's well-being in the government of Uganda. We are encouraging people, those are the Bennett people, to plant trees. Though they don't want to plant trees, they believe that their life is in the natural trees. We have decided to tell them to at least plant 3 or 4 trees because that's where the life of Bennett is. If they want honey, they can put the up the trees and have life just like the way they used to. But though they are not satisfied, we are actually trying to bring life to the Bennett by encouraging them to plant more trees in those small areas they are living. And then we are still lobbying for the government help that if we are gazetted, actually we want to go back to the forest because we realize that life in the forest is more easier. As the government of Uganda says, this is encroachment, this is bad, but we know that when we are in the forest, that is our home. That is where we stay. That is where we get what we want. We are never satisfied outside the forest because our life is directly connected to the forest. We have everything in the forest or near the trees that we used to live. We used to have the traditional medicine just around the trees. Around the forest, we could gather any fruit, and that is what we want. And as me, myself, that is what I want. I want to reconnect back to the trees, to reconnect back to the forest, and have life just flowing. We, together with the Ministry of Health.
1 minute, yes? Please, to go to the conclusion.
Okay. So in my conclusion, I still have a lot to say, but we, the Bennett, want to reconnect. Whether they say it is illegal to live in the forest because we are encroachers, no, we say life is in the forest. Life is in the trees. Life is staying together with the forest, staying together with the trees. Thank you very much. I think I can end there for today.
Sì. Grazie Sharon, anche io sarei stato ad ascoltarti per altre ore. Bellissima la vostra esperienza, l'importanza della gestione degli alberi e dell'uomo con le api che portano non solo alimentazione agli uomini ma fanno impollinazione e generano vita nella vegetazione. Ricordo che si possono porre delle domande ai relatori e abbiamo adesso avuto l'esperienza di Bennett, quindi di un paese in Uganda. Ora passo la parola a Johnson, che è il direttore di una delle più antiche organizzazioni ambientaliste dell'Islanda, l'Associazione Forestale Islandese, e ci racconta un ambiente così diverso dall'Uganda, ma un amore per gli alberi così uguale per la vegetazione da parte della popolazione. Johnson, a te la parola, hai 8 minuti e la possibilità di ricevere le domande alla fine dell'incontro. Prego. Open the microphone.
Now it's open. Thank you. Thank you, Ranil and Sharon, for your contribution. I'm taking you to the middle of the Atlantic Ridge, where Iceland is, and is moving apart slowly, 2 centimeters per year. That's how the tectonic geology works. The Iceland was settled 1200 years ago. And you can say that at that time, the land was a land of milk and honey. The forest cover was about 30–40%. But today, it's not so. In 1900, it was only or less than 1%. So the activity of man in 1200 years moved us to a very much decline of the forests, and what started was soil erosion. The flora was very sensitive because it was very poor in a way, because we were in the middle of the Atlantic, and probably some species were extinct. But at that time, 1900, for 120 years ago, we started to rehabilitate the forest and fight against the soil erosion in Iceland. And this had also to do with that there were no fire anymore, there were no forests, and there were only few remnants of forests in Iceland, and the primary forests were disappeared. This is the history everywhere in the world, actually. And in 1930, there were established a forestry association, and many participate in this movement. And today we are about 7,000 members, and there is a huge challenge to come up with plans and to reforest Iceland. But this movement is an NGO organization, and we do a lot of the, at least 20–25% of the annual forestry is done by those volunteer organizations. We are an umbrella organization, and all our organizations are placed all around Iceland. There are about 60 associations, and we cope with our membership by holding annual meetings and try to support our associations in anyhow and every way. But this is very important of the success of doing it. That's the people in the place, local place. They know the land and they know the people. They know the municipals who are responsible there, and that's how we have been successful in doing what we are doing. We are making the life better in Iceland. And people are supporting our cause. That's important. This is a part of the global climate change that we are fighting for, and we are mostly reclaiming birds, forests, and also we are focused on recreation forests. That's very, very important to the local community to heal the land and the soil that have disappeared, and by planting seedlings and plants. And this afforestation has been successful in many of our towns and municipals. So we are building up a forest resource that didn't exist and do it in a sustainably way. Actually, we are at 2% of the population. So we think we have achieved quite much, and we will proceed this in a proper way. We are also have a very responsible against we think of the community welfare and with positive actions. This is also important in our times where obesity is a problem, and also psychiatric problems, and public health is also important everywhere in the Western world and further on. So in those, what is most meaningful for my opinion is how we have been working with primary schools in Iceland. Every spring and every fall, there are about 10,000 young people that participate in planting trees. We have started a fund that was actually our former idea of our former president, Vigdís Finnbogadóttir, that was elected in 1980, the first female at that time that was elected. And she had also very much interest in forestry and reclaiming the land. So for this reason, we...
You have 1 minute to go.
Thank you. For this reason, we think of the next generation. It makes a meaningful work to plant trees. It's important for well-being. It gives much hope, and the young people develop in a proper way, and that's our future, and that's how we manage our young people to think of a better world in the future. Thank you.
Grazie Johnson, scusa se ho dovuto interromperti, è per dare la parola anche agli altri e far fare le domande. È molto bello che passiamo da Sharon che parla di foreste e alimentazione, a Johnson che parla di foreste ed educazione e salute. Vediamo un'altra prospettiva del rapporto foresta-uomo e do la parola a Renzo che rappresenta il mondo delle foreste del Mediterraneo, anzi delle foreste più abitate al mondo, che sono le foreste alpine. Quindi ho la curiosità di avere da lui la condivisione di questa esperienza alpina. Grazie, metti la presentazione, perfetto. A te la parola.
Thank you, Antonio. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Antonio? Okay, I assume that you can hear me. Thank you, Antonio. Thank you, Rani, Sharon, and Johnson for your inspiring speech. Just yesterday in Italy, we had the Party of Trees, where the pupils plant trees at the primary school. And so we recognize the importance of working with young people that are the future, the regeneration of our on our not only tree but also people. The relationships between the forest and humans are so many and so deep that it is difficult to talk about, to discuss the whole range in 8 minutes. So I would like to draw your attention to an anecdotal history of paradox about protection forest in the European Alps. You know that European Alps are a barrier, a crossroad between north and south and west and east. And for this reason, the Alps have been crossed, used seasonally, and then inhabited for a long time. You know probably the history of Ötzi, the man who died 4,000 years before present, crossing the Alps. And at that time, it was the beginning of the colonization of the Alps. But since that time, people have started to settle the Alps and to cut the trees. So the deforestation of the Alps, the blue line that you can see, was more or less continuous for the last centuries until the end of the 19th century. The importance of the forest is related to many use of the forest. The deforestation has provoked the loss of the primary forest, like in Iceland, but we have maintained some small patch of forest in the Alps because these forests were important for the protection against the avalanche, rockfall, landslide, and floods. So this is the results of this long-term colonization. You can see that there is a small patch of forest. The red lines are the original forest that covers all the slope. But why we cut all the forest and we last only this small patch of trees? Because the fear of dying for starvation was much higher than the fear to die under an avalanche in the Alps. So in the Middle Age, they started to establish regulation, establish ban to protect the last patches of this forest because they were important, fundamental for the life of the people in the Alps. So now we have this heritage of the past. You can see the green triangle on the right is a protection forest that protected the village that there is below. And these small patches of forest are in most valley the only place of the valley that was not clear cut or transformed in pasture in the last centuries. So these forests are very important because are cultural heritage and have also an environmental importance because these forests are different from the forests that have been intensively managed from human. You can see another example in the Eastern Alps. The beech forest that protect the village is completely different from the Norway spruce forest that have been intensively managed. But the situation changed dramatically in the last century. Now the forest cover has doubled, and the importance of the protection forest has increased because in the past we needed to protect the spot, the village. Now we need to protect the road system. We have winter tourism and so on. But in the same time, we have lost this cultural connection with protection forest. So we have a lot of protection forest, but we are not aware of the importance of the protection forest. We cannot live in the mountains without taking care of our forest, and we really don't know that the climate crisis will affect also the protection role of the forest. And we need, from the technical, but also from the cultural point of view, to recognize this role and reconnect people that live in the valleys or use the valley for tourism or for other purposes with the important role of the forest. Thank you very much, Antonio, and all the one.
Grazie Renzo, perfetto nei tempi, sei un vero professore, sia come qualità di argomenti che come tempistiche. Questo ci permette di arrivare alle domande. La prima cosa che vi voglio dire è che grazie ai nostri relatori abbiamo parlato di foresta e protezione di biodiversità e clima, poi foresta e alimentazione, foresta ed educazione e salute e poi foresta e protezione del mondo urbano e dei cittadini. Questo perché da 2 anni più del 50% della popolazione mondiale vive in aree urbane. Quindi si è allontanato dal mondo della natura, dal mondo rurale. Ma ancora 1 miliardo di persone vive collegato alla alimentazione e alla economia delle foreste. Quindi il paradosso è proprio che noi ci stiamo allontanando sempre di più dalla fonte di vita che sono gli alberi, che è la vegetazione. Questa è una piccola riflessione, ma adesso ci sono delle domande. La prima domanda è per Sharon dell'Uganda ed è questa. So che ci sono persone in Kenya, la popolazione Sengwer, che ha un tabù nel tagliare gli alberi. È una cosa simile anche per il tuo villaggio di Benet, oppure ci sono delle tradizioni per la protezione degli alberi nel tuo villaggio? A te la parola, Sharon.
Thank you for the question. We have a lot of rules that govern our trees as the Benets. Number one, we don't just cut trees, and we don't cut trees. For ladies or women who go to gather firewood for fuel, we usually gather the dead wood, the ones that have fallen down on the, but we don't cut trees. Number two, there are always trees that are holy, cultural trees that are holy. So you find that we don't just cut trees because we believe that other trees are holy and they are not supposed to be cut. If you cut them, they are a curse. Then we usually have rituals that we perform under the trees. So it's really hard. We don't cut the trees. What we do is just we have a life with the trees. Thank you. So if you have a life with trees, you don't cut. If you have a life with somebody, you rarely don't destroy that life with you, because the moment you destroy the life, you also lose the life. Thank you.
Grazie, molto chiaro. La domanda era da Luis Francisco Prieto, che ringrazio per la domanda. Poi c'è una domanda per Ranil da Bastiel Buffo, che ringrazio. Ranil, puoi spiegare un po' meglio l'idea della biocurrency, della moneta biologica per il recupero della terra, e se puoi l'analog forestry? Forse scegli una, così che diamo poi anche a Johnson la possibilità, che anche lui ha una domanda. A te la parola.
Thank you. No, well, I'll give you both, basically. Analog forestry started because traditional forestry was just planting monocultures. And we said, this is ridiculous. Forestry is not making plantations. Forestry is to create a forest. So how do we do this? We said that do it, you have to take the original forest as your model Analog forestry means being analogous to the original climax vegetation in architectural structure and ecological function. The species used could be exotics, could be a mix, but it must be analogous to the mature ecosystem in architectural structure and ecological function. That is basically analog forestry. There's an international network. Our secretariat is in Costa Rica. You will have our webpage. You can go there and check it out. Earth Restoration, my other company, we are looking to create biocurrency by capitalizing on primary ecosystem services. All farmers, we in our farms, we are producing oxygen, we are producing clean water, but no, we are not being paid for that, right? That is a free gift we give. We have looked at it and said, if we put a value on this, we can give farmers more money, we can give rural people more money for planting and looking after trees because they can be paid for their primary ecosystem services, the PES. So our company now looks to take fiat currency and turn it into biocurrency by putting it through our system that records the primary ecosystem services that are released from any farm or farmer who's registered with us. And you can also go to our webpage and check that also. It is called restore.earth. Thank you.
Molto gentile e affascinante l'idea di dare al currency, una valuta biologica, il giusto valore, perché oltre al soldo c'è sempre l'area biologica che nessuno conta, ma è fondamentale. Grazie. Una domanda per Jonsson da parte di Dominic Pledel. Quale è il ruolo degli agricoltori nel recuperare le foreste e come si gestisce questo aspetto? Come i farmers gestiscono poi le foreste recuperate? Prego.
Yes, in Iceland, there are several farmers that take a part in the in forestry through the government actions, and the first thing what is done is the planning of the forest on their land, and it starts there, and they have to have license to start the farming, and then the farming is planned. As you know, those foresters who know that you have to have this species on this site and so on, and also take in account the landscape and if there are old ruins and so on. So this is what the government has been doing for about 40 years, and is the biggest part of the Icelandic forestry. I told you before in my speak that the NGO is about 25–30% of the total work in the forestry sector in Iceland. The farmers are taking part of the rest, about 70–75%.
Bene, questo conferma che il ruolo del settore primario e quindi degli agricoltori, di chi coltiva la natura, è indispensabile e fondamentale, assolutamente, e conferma anche l'importanza che Slow Food, che è un'organizzazione che si occupa proprio dell'alimentazione dei consumatori, faccia cultura sul tema della gestione delle foreste, perché siamo tutti uniti da uno stesso destino, cioè noi siamo eterotrofi, noi consumiamo solo perché le piante sono autotrofe, che ci aiutano a trasformare l'energia del sole in energia chimica inalimentabile. Forse, grazie anche agli esempi di Ramil, di Sharon, di Johnson e di Renzo, dopo questa ora abbiamo più chiara l'idea che non esiste un paradosso nell'esistenza umana e negli alberi. Esiste solo una differente modalità di pensare dell'uomo moderno rispetto alla natura. Quindi dobbiamo lavorare sulla cultura del consumatore per ritornare il più vicino al rapporto sano che c'è nel vivere nella natura. Vi ringrazio per questo bellissimo momento di confronto. C'è la possibilità di fare un questionario per il gradimento di questo evento. Per chi è adesso in diretta, trova nella chat il link per poter dire se è piaciuto e cosa è mancato. A me è mancato il tempo, perché vorrei stare con voi almeno fino alla fine della serata. Vi ringrazio, vi abbraccio tutti e viva la vita. Grazie.
Grazie. Molto grazie. Grazie.
The future of our planet is decided at the table, in our daily food choices. What do we know about what we eat? How do we choose? Where do we buy it? You can make a difference and contribute to a future where everyone has access to food that is good. Eating must be a pleasure for everyone. We all have a right to food that is healthy, natural, fresh, and seasonal. Clean. Being aware helps us to choose food that is good for our health and the health of our planet. Fair. Knowing our food means making choices that are fair to us, to the producers, and to future generations. Slow Food has been working for over 30 years to defend biodiversity and fight the climate crisis by promoting good, clean, and fair food for all. Support Slow Food. Let's act together for the common good. Go to donate.slowfood.com/en and follow us at terramadreselunadelgusta.com.
Grazie a tutti.
A posto, grazie alle traduttrici.